computer. There we go. Lovely. And the other thing is to make sure you've got a pen and paper with you. So I'm hoping you've all managed to get a pen and paper with you, because I will be asking you to do some little exercises tonight. And it will be stuff that you can take away with you and use. So, yeah, I've thought about doing this for a while because I've done a lot of work with some of you on the nutrition side, and not a lot of work with all of you on the NLP side. And some of you haven't done any work with at all. So I thought it would be nice to talk to you about how, when I get a client coming to me, how do I approach it from a nutrition perspective, and how do I approach their issues from an NLP perspective? And my early years were all very NLP based. I qualified in NLP about 22 years ago. So I've been using those skills for a very long while, but very quickly realised that it's not just the mind that we need to help improve our physical and mental well-being. It's also what we're eating, which has a huge impact. And I think the real learning point for me was realising, when it comes particularly to anxiety or overwhelm, or however you want to describe worry, it was changing diet that had such a massive impact on people. And I'd have thought it would have been more mindfulness or meditation and stuff, but I'm realizing that actually changing the diet has a massive impact on the mental health. So ever since then, I've been sort of combining nutrition with NLP to help people achieve what I like to call optimal health. So that the best condition of health that you as an individual can be in. So that really is my goal. So I thought I would just look at 5 main areas. And the areas that I looked at were things where clients are always coming to me with particular issues. And one of them is fatigue. So a lot of people come to me with, you know, feeling tired all the time. A lot of people come to me with cravings, like how do I stop diving into the biscuit tin? Another one was overwhelm and sort of anxiety. It's always a big one, comes up a lot in discussions with clients. One of them, which I've linked very much to overwhelm, is digestive distress. So a lot of people have digestive disorders, and this also links very much to mental health issues. So I kind of link those two together. And the last one really is weight management. A lot of people come to me saying, I need to shift the weight. And in fact, normally they come to me with that as the first thing. It's like, I want to lose weight. And then when we actually talk about other issues, they've got so many other health issues, but it's always the weight that's the key focus. And the problem is with that is a lot of people, when they just focus on trying to lose weight, what they tend to do is just undernourish themselves. And hence they just feel very ill in many other areas of their body as well. So I tend to not like to focus on weight loss as a goal. I see that as a side effect of being a more healthy person. So I will talk about that at the end. Now, I'm hoping that we will get through all my material, but I very much doubt it. And I'm going to stop at about 8:45, because I'd really like then to open the floor up and give you guys a chance to ask questions. And then I'll just be online for as long as that takes. So if we go after 9 o'clock with questions, I've got no problem in doing that at all. But I will stop at 9:15 to open up the floor for questions. So one of the reasons for having your pen and paper is that if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, sit them down, write them down for yourself so you can remember them at the end. And I like to do them at the end because you might find that I actually answer your question. So you might have a question in the next 5 minutes, but in the next 20 minutes, I answer it. So hold on to those questions and then we'll cover them all at the end. So we're going to dive straight in. First topic is fatigue. And what I'm going to do with each of the topics is I'm going to talk about one area of nutrition that I will use to conquer fatigue, and also one technique of NLP that I will use. And I'll come on to a bit more detail about NLP in a moment. So we're going to talk about the nutrition side first of all. When it comes to fatigue, for me, it is very, very obvious in nutrition what it is we need to be doing. And the problem is in the Western world is that we have a very high carbohydrate diet, very carbohydrate driven. And hence we're fueled a lot by glucose. Now, in every cell in our body, this is you casting your mind back to your biology O-level or GCSE, O-level if you're an oldie like me, and GCSEs if you're a little bit younger. But if you did biology, maybe you didn't do biology at all, but within every cell in our body, apart from our blood cells, we have little bacteria-like organisms called mitochondria. And these are the powerhouses of our cells. This is what produces energy. And these mitochondria produce energy in the form of a molecule called ATP, which stands for adenosine triphosphate. You don't need to know that bit. ATP, and this is energy currency to use anywhere in the body. Now, for the mitochondria to make ATP so that we have enough energy to function, they need fuel. And they need fuel there's only two forms of fuel that they can use. One is glucose from the breakdown of carbohydrate, and the other is ketones from the breakdown of fats. If we have a very carbohydrate-driven diet, we will only ever fuel our cells with glucose. But the problem is with glucose is that it doesn't have all these huge benefits that ketones have. So when we have a ketogenic diet, i.e. we are burning ketones for fuel instead of glucose for fuel, we produce a lot less free radicals in that chemical process. And free radicals are very dangerous molecules that rampage around our body causing disease. So if we can reduce the amount of free radicals in our body, that's very healthy for us. And it also is a very anti-aging effect. Free radicals are very aging, whereas if we can reduce our free radicals, it keeps us younger for longer. So when we use ketones or burn ketones for fuel, we actually have a much cleaner source of energy and a much more efficient source of energy. The brain and the heart run 25% more efficiently on ketones than they do on glucose. So your brain will be brighter and your energy within your body and within your heart will be much stronger if you're actually burning ketones for fuel instead of glucose. The other thing that's really useful to know is that cancer cells in our body are only fueled by glucose. So if we have any cancerous cells in our body, if we are having a very, very low carbohydrate diet and are using ketones for fuel instead of glucose for fuel, the cancer cells will die because the cancer cells will only be able to survive on glucose. So it's a very anti-cancer diet. And the other thing it is it's a very anti-inflammatory diet. So it reduces pain in the body. That's one of the other things that people come to me with is pain. They have joint pain, muscle pain. And again, if you're burning glucose, you'll have more pain in your body. But when you burn ketones, which is very anti-inflammatory, the inflammation in the body is reduced and hence the pain throughout the body is reduced. So it's very, very powerful. So that's lesson number one is a ketogenic diet. And one way of doing a ketogenic diet is really to reduce the carbohydrates that you eat. And as a result of that, you have to increase healthy fats, you have to have good fiber, you have to have a moderate amount of protein. And this is all quite complicated to do. So there are many programs out there that do it. I have a program myself that helps people. And I know some of you are in the middle of that or have actually completed that program. But it just teaches you how to live as what I call a fat burning animal, which means you are burning fat for fuel instead of burning glucose for fuel. So that's the first part of nutrition and fatigue. How I would deal with this from an NLP perspective is quite interesting, really, because it's very hard to tell yourself that you're not tired when you are all the time. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to introduce you to NLP itself. NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and it's basically how the language that we have stored in our brain from all our memories, it's how that language impacts our neurology and impacts our behavior. If we can change the language And that language can be stored either as pictures, it can be stored as sounds. If we can change that language, then we can reprogram ourselves. We can change the way that we behave. And there's a great diagram that I like to share with my clients, which explains about our programming, our unconscious programming. How have we been programmed to behave? So I hope you can all see that diagram, and this just really explains what NLP is all about. So we take information in from the outside world through our 5 senses. V is visual, A, auditory through sound, K is kinesthetically through touch and through our body, O is olfactory through smell, and G is gustatory through taste. And when we experience an event, all those 5 senses are alerted, and that information comes into our conscious mind. The thing is, our conscious mind has a very limited capacity. It can only actually process between 7 plus or minus 2 pieces of information per second, which isn't very much when we are aware that we actually are bombarded with 2.2 million bits of information per second. So what do we do with all those extra bits of information? Because we cannot store them in the conscious mind. What we do is we actually dump them into the unconscious mind. But we don't actually dump them exactly how we witness them. We do a number of things to them first. We actually filter the information that comes our way. One thing that we'll do, we filter it in 3 different ways. One thing we do is we delete information. So if we're experiencing an event, there'll be just some things that we just do not notice, and we just delete them out of our memory. The next thing we do is we actually distort the information. And this is probably our most powerful tool, because we actually make up that information that comes our way. We change it slightly. And the third thing that we do is we actually generalize. So we base our current experience on previous experiences. We just expect them. We assume that they're going to be a certain way, and hence that's how we filter the information. Now, what I tend to do, if I've got you all in a room at this moment in time, because when I've done talks like this, I have you all sat in a room in a hotel, say, and I get you all to close your eyes and to tell me what you think you can see in the room, i.e. what is the colour of the chair that you're sitting on? Questions like that. And I remember doing this for a group of school children who are like 15 or 16 years old, and they're in assembly. An assembly room that they'd sat in for probably the last 5 years for a good half hour most days. And I asked them to tell me what was the colour of the chairs, what was the colour of the curtains, how many windows were there, how many doors were there, those sort of questions. And then I got them to open their eyes, and there was this gasp from all of them because they could not believe that they had no idea what the actual room looked like that they were sitting in. They'd basically invented it in their own mind. And that's what we do. We take our experiences that we have, we then filter that information, and then we put it into our unconscious mind. And there it is stored as a visual memory, as an auditory memory, kinesthetic memory, as a smell, and as a taste. But what we need to realize is that this information that's in our unconscious mind now is not the same as what we experience outside. It's purely just our perception of what we experienced. And once we've experienced all these events, then put them into the unconscious mind, they get stored there, and they get stored as memories, they're stored as emotions, habits, beliefs, values. All these experiences that we've had in our life to date are all stored in our unconscious mind, but they are filtered from what we initially saw. So these experiences that we have and how we've built up this information in our unconscious mind is just our interpretation of our life to date, not actually what happened to us. The thing is, the water actually gets a little bit muddier when we look at how we recall memories. So if I was going to ask you to recall the last time you went on holiday, you will then bring up a memory as to what actually happened on that memory. And the memory will go from the unconscious mind to the conscious mind, which will then say, yeah, now I can relive the memory. And it will relive it in, this is what we saw, so you'll relive it in pictures. This is what I heard, so you'll relive it in sounds. This is what we did, so you'll relive it in physical actions. But once you've finished reliving that memory of your holiday, you can't keep it in the conscious mind forever, because remember, the conscious mind has a very limited capacity of only 7 plus or minus 2 pieces of information. So it has to put it back into the unconscious, but it doesn't put it back this way. It actually filters it further. So once you've actually relived a memory 4 or 5 times, it's actually nothing like it was when you actually first experienced it. It's just your perception. Now, why does this become important? And it's because when we experience an event and we put it into our unconscious mind, if it's a significant event, we might keep repeating that memory to ourselves again and again and again. And every time we repeat it, we then add to it, we filter it further, we spectacularize it more, we distort it a bit more. And really where this is important, I'll give you a little example, might be children when they're younger, if they're told that they're not very good at maths, they end up creating a belief that they're not very good at maths because they've experienced that a number of times, and then they've just thought about it in their head. I know that I'm not very good at maths because I've just been told that I'm not very good at maths. So then they just create this belief that they're not very good at maths, and it just gets stuck in the unconscious mind as a belief that limits them for what they want to achieve. But how can we use this information to change ourselves? So if we wanted to change the way that we thought, because if we think about it, the thought of being tired, or the thought of being sad, or the thought of being angry is literally just a thought that we've created in our head. And I know that we have those feelings, but also it's a thought that's actually there. And if we can change the way that we think, then maybe we can change the way that we feel. And how we do that is we do that by manipulating our filters. We manipulate what we're deleting, what we're distorting, and what we're generalizing from. Because in life, do we just delete all the good things that happen to us and just remember all the bad things? Or do we do the reverse? Do we distort information positively, or do we distort it negatively? And do we generalize from bad past events or good past events? Because depending on what we do at these filters is what we're going to then store in the unconscious mind. But to change how we filter it, we need to consciously do that. And how we can do that is by looking at this visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory ways of manipulating the way that we feel. Now, in NLP terms, it's actually very difficult in a split second to manipulate olfactory and gustatory, because it's very difficult to manipulate what you're tasting and what you're smelling. But it is very, very easy to manipulate what pictures you're conjuring up in your mind, what sounds, what words you're saying to yourself, and how you actually are using your body kinesthetically. So these 3 things is what we tend to focus on. And we use that in something called the emotional state. So in the our emotional state, or our emotional triad, so our emotional state is affected by these 3 things. If we are feeling tired, then we'll be conjuring up images in our mind of being tired. We will also have a language pattern which tells us that we are tired. We will also be adopting a kinesthetic body position that is tired. And all these 3 things affect the way that we behave. If we want to change our behavior, then it's about changing what is it that we're visualizing, what are the visual images we're creating in our mind, what's the language pattern, what are we saying to ourselves, and what's our body doing. So just an example of fatigue. Your language pattern is probably something like when you wake up in the morning, it's like, oh God, I feel so tired. Now, when you say that to yourself, how does that make you feel? That makes you feel tired, as an example. So it's useful, this triad, and we're going to keep coming back to this diagram because we use that in NLP to manipulate the emotional state to change our behavior. You just stop sharing that. Now, that was a lot of information. Hopefully I haven't lost any of you there. But the emotional triad is a very, very useful tool when it comes to changing your behavior. Just touching on fatigue. Now, a lot of people are tired in the day because they don't sleep very well at night time. And a lot of people are anxious about going to bed because they think I'm not going to fall asleep, or they think when I wake up in the night, I'm not going to be able to get back off to sleep. And normally that's because when you get into bed, the mind goes, doesn't it? It was, and you worry about what happened in the day. You're worrying about what you got to do tomorrow. You're thinking through all these things. And that is the mind keeping you awake. It's that constant language pattern that's going round and round and round. So one thing that I get my clients to do is to learn how to switch off that language in the brain when you go to sleep. The thing is, it's very difficult to switch off your language. Very important to switch off what you're saying to yourself. In fact, it's pretty much impossible. The mind's always got something in it. So if we just for a few seconds now, just go silent, and I want you to try and not think of anything at all. Okay, go. Okay, you can come back to me. I noticed some of you closed your eyes there to really concentrate hard. How did you do? Did anyone manage to completely empty their brain for 10 seconds?
No.
Isn't that impossible to do? Yeah. So to stop ourselves from thinking worrying thoughts that's going to stop us from sleeping properly, we need to think of other things to block that out. The best way to get off to sleep is not to think of anything that's happened and not to think of anything that's going to happen. It's to think of a made-up story. So I call it a sleep dream. A story that you're going to make up in your mind. And one that what I like to do is like my first one I used to do was walking through a lavender field. And I would just get deeper and deeper and deeper into the lavender field, looking around and smelling it and looking at things and telling myself how lovely the lavender field looked. The one that I do at the moment is gardening. So I pretend I'm out in my garden and I'm deadheading flowers, or I'm doing this, or I'm moving that. And that's what I look at. And that becomes my sleep dream. And then it just switches off everything else. Because you can only do one thing at a time. You can't be thinking of that and worrying about what you're going to do tomorrow. So my suggestion there, particularly when it comes to fatigue and trying to sleep properly, is make up your own sleep dream. My husband's latest one, his one was scuba diving. So he was diving off a boat. Now his latest one is that he's a superhero. And he goes to the Prime Minister and he says, "What problem do you want me to solve?" And the Prime Minister tells him, and he flies up around the world and solves the problem. That's his sleep dream. There you go. Mine's gardening. Slight difference in personalities there, as you can see. But yes, so yes, sleep dream to help with your fatigue. Really useful tool. Right, let's move on to the next one, cravings. Oh my God, cravings. This one is such an easy one to resolve, and it's the one that people say that is just the worst one. And it really is, your cravings come from your gut bacteria in your small intestine shouting at you to feed me. Now, we have a microbiome, which is a load of microbes that sit in our gut. And there's about 100 trillion of them, more than there are, 10 times more than there are cells in the body. And these are very important to our health, and it's our job to nurture them and feed them some nice fiber so that they can increase and do all the good things that they do. But if we have too much sugar in our diet, or too much, or even carbohydrates in our diet, too much of it, these migrate up to the small intestine, and they should really be in the large intestine, and they feast on sugar. When they feast on sugar, they produce some nasty toxic side effects, and they also grow in size. And then as they grow in size, they communicate to the brain via what's called the gut-brain axis. Some of you may have heard of. The gut communicates super fast in a super fast highway via the vagus nerve up to the brain. And as these microbes, when you feed them with sugar, increase in number, they just start communicating more to the brain, give me more sugar. And we know that, don't we? Because as soon as you have that one chocolate hobnob, you have to have the whole packet. As soon as you have that one packet of you get the open Pringles, that lovely big tin of Pringles, you have the first two, you've got to finish the lot. Yeah, it's addictive, this stuff. Sugar is addictive, more addictive than cocaine. So and we're programmed actually to be addicted to sugar, because that's what the caveman was programmed to do, was to stuff his face with it whenever he got his hands on it, because he didn't get his hands on it that often, so he was programmed to stuff his face with it. But the thing is, we're not supposed to be eating it all year round like we do. So one way to stop the cravings is just to stop eating the sugar and the carbohydrates, and the cravings will stop. It might take 2 to 3 days. You might feel a little bit rough during that time period, but those cravings will go. So how would I deal with cravings when it comes to NLP? Well, there's a lovely technique that I use, which is called a swish pattern, and it's for changing habits, because cravings are a bit like bad habits, aren't they? Now, we might have cravings for sugar, we might have cravings for alcohol, you know, we have cravings for lots of different things. And the swish pattern is actually a very useful tool when it comes to just changing those cravings and just getting rid of those cravings, because they really are a bit addictive, and it's a bit like a really bad habit. So let me share my screen with you again, and I'm going to take you through habit change. So let's first of all go on to habits. This time, instead of manipulating the language, which is the one that we were manipulating before, was the language pattern. This time we're going to be manipulating visual images, the images that we create. And how do we do that when it comes to changing habits? Let's talk a little bit about how habits are formed. How we create a habit is, first of all, we experience something and it creates a behavior. So let me give you an example of this, and we'll probably all have this one, because you're all from my kind of generation, is that one of my big ones is not being able to leave anything on my plate. So as a child, and my mum is listening today and she will agree with this, I was always asked to empty my plate, to finish everything on my plate. So I would sit at the table until my plate was empty. So the next day I sat down to eat my dinner and made sure the plate was empty. And then the next day I did the same and the same and the same. And every time that you're doing you're experiencing something and creating the same behavior, you're creating a neural pathway, which is getting stronger and stronger and stronger, to the point where I now can't ever leave anything on my plate. I have to eat everything that's on my plate. And that is a habit, because even if I'm absolutely stuffed, I still feel like I need to finish everything on my plate. So how do we then change this? Another example of this could be you're feeling a little bit stressed, so you think you'll have a glass of wine because it makes you feel a bit better. Or maybe you've been really good, you've had a really good day, so you're going to celebrate and have a glass of wine because you've had such a good day. Yeah, this is an experience which leads to a behavior, and the more you do, you have that trigger of the experience leading to the behavior, the stronger the neurological pathway comes. Another example of it will be smoking. So say you know that when you're feeling a bit stressed and you have a cigarette, it then makes you feel better. So therefore you have another cigarette to make you feel better, and hence you create a habit. The thing is, you end up with what happens with a habit is you get a trigger and you have an unconscious reaction. You don't even consciously think about it. So it's becoming one aware of the trigger that's creating the unconscious reaction. Thing is, it's very, very difficult once this has happened, once you've created a habit, it's very difficult to stop it because you can't just stop a habit. There's a couple of quotes here which I quite like. First we make our habits, then our habits make us. And Aristotle, we are what we repeatedly do. So it's very, very difficult because the trigger comes with a big momentum. So that trigger of maybe feeling stressed comes with a big momentum, or that feeling of, oh, I'm feeling a little bit peckish comes with a momentum. Yeah. It might be, the trigger might be, I'm feeling a bit stressed, I'm going to have something to eat. That'll make me feel a bit better. Yeah. It all depends. All of us have different triggers and we all have a different behavior as a result of that trigger. But once you've created a habit, it is very, very difficult to stop that habit. You try and tell a smoker just to stop smoking. It's really, really difficult. So you can't just stop it. It's like you can't just stop thinking words. You have to say other words to override what it is that you're saying to yourself. And it's kind of the same process here, that instead of actually just stopping the behavior, what you do is you create a new behavior. And then once you've done that new behavior a number of times, eventually that neural pathway becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. And the other one just isn't used so much, so it just disappears. So how do we use that when it comes to changing your habits? What I want you to do is I want you to write down what is a bad habit that you have. It could be anything. It can be to do with cravings. It can be to do with craving a glass of wine or craving a chocolate hobnob or whatever it is. Let's just think down, what is a habit that you have? Something that there's an emotional trigger, or there's a trigger that makes you behave a certain way that you don't like doing and you want to do something else. And just write down what that behavior is that you don't like, that habit that you'd like to change. Once you've done that, I want you to think about what's the trigger. So let's go back to the glass of wine scenario. The trigger for me, when I was working full time and I used to drive back down the M3 and it would be about 7 o'clock at night, and I'd be thinking, oh, can't wait for a glass of wine when I get in. I've had a long day, got to have that glass of wine when I get in. So for me, the trigger would be driving down the M3. That was the trigger. Because the process, the momentum had already started to build at that point. So think about what is the trigger that starts this momentum for you wanting to create that bad behavior. And just write down what that trigger is.
My brain is referring it's almost like it's
Okay. And then what I want you to do is I want you to close your eyes and I want you to get a picture of you doing the trigger. But I want you to see yourself like you're like a fly on the wall watching yourself do the trigger. Yeah. Actually, no. Let's have you in your body. So I want you to be in your own body doing this. So it's kind of like you feel the sensation of the trigger happening, or you can see in your mind's eye the trigger happen. So for me, I'll be sat in my car and I'll be like looking through the windscreen going down the M3. That would be my trigger. Okay. So that's what's called your trigger picture. So just remember your trigger picture. You can open your eyes now once you've got your trigger picture kind of in your head. Now I want you to think about what would you like to do instead? So when that trigger happens, so instead of reaching for the glass of wine, maybe I drink for a nice glass of sparkling water with some sliced lemon in it, or maybe a kombucha or whatever, or maybe a cup of herbal tea. Yeah. What would you like to do instead of that behavior? So instead of reaching for the chocolate hobnob, maybe you're reaching for a handful of Brazil nuts. Let's just think about what would you like to do instead, and just write that down. So what's the new behavior going to be? Okay, then once you've got your new behavior, I want you to close your eyes again, and I want you to get a picture of you doing your new behavior. But this time you are a fly on the wall. So you're a fly on the wall watching yourself doing your new behavior. The thing that in this picture is you look amazing. Okay, you look the best you've ever looked. You look fab, you've got your best outfit on, and you're looking brilliant doing your new behavior. Okay. Excellent. Okay, open your eyes. So now you've got two pictures at your disposal. You've got your trigger picture, what happens just before, and then you've got your new behavior picture. What we're going to do is we're going to overlap one with the other. So we're going to bring up the trigger and we're going to create the new behavior. We're going to bring up the trigger, we're going to create the new behavior. What I want you to imagine is you've got your trigger picture when it comes up. I want you to imagine it's like an ice cube and it's going to be shattered into a million places when your new behavior comes in. So you bring up your trigger picture, it shatters into a million pieces, and you have your new behavior after. Okay, so close your eyes and bring up your trigger picture. And then in comes your new behavior. It smashes that into a million pieces. And all you've got left in front of you is you looking fantastic doing your new behavior. Okay, wipe that picture clean and bring up the trigger picture again. Okay. So you've got that trigger picture, what happens just before. And then in comes the new behavior. Smashes that into a million pieces again. And all you've got left in front of you now is you doing your new behavior. Let's wipe that clean once more. Let's bring back up the trigger picture, what happens just before. And then in comes your new behavior. Smashes that trigger picture into a million pieces, and all you've got left in front of you is you looking fab doing the new behavior. And we're going to do that one more time. So wipe it clean, bring up the trigger picture again, and in comes the new behavior. Smashes the trigger picture into a million pieces, and there's you looking fab doing your new behavior. Excellent. Okay, you can open your eyes. Now we started there using visualization to manipulate your neurology. What will happen now is when that trigger happens to you next time, you'll go, oh, I know I've got to do something different now, and I know what that is. Yeah. And then you do it. And then it will happen again, and you do the new behavior. And the more you get the trigger and do the new behavior, the less the old behavior will become prevalent. Yeah. And it'll just become weaker and weaker until it disappears. Now, I had a lady did this. She's such a funny story. Her trigger was coming in and eating chocolate when she got home from work. So she decided she wanted to come from the door and eat a banana. She thought that'd be healthier than actually eating chocolate. So that was her plan, was to eat banana. So we did this exercise with her, and off she went. And she came back a week later. I said, how did it go? She said, it was just so funny. She said, day one, I walked through the door and I went straight to the fruit bowl and I got my banana. But I had to really think about it, like, right, I'm going to have a banana. I'm going to have a banana. The next day, same thing. I'm going to have a banana. She went in, had her banana. By about day 4, she said, I was standing in my kitchen eating a banana and I thought, oh, she said, I hadn't even thought about it. I was just doing it. And it took her 4 days. It's just amazing how very quickly the new behavior had happened. So the more you get the trigger and practice the new behavior, the more it will happen. But what you'll find now is you're just going to get a little jolt, because as soon as that trigger happens, you're going to go, oh, which you've never done before. So what we've done now is we've now brought it to your conscious mind. We've brought that trigger to your conscious mind. Now you're consciously manipulating what you're filtering into your unconscious mind. Good. So let's move. How are we doing? Oh, got a few more minutes. I just want to quickly cover overwhelm and anxiety. So the biggest thing about nutrition and when it comes to anxiety in the brain is toxins in the gut. So when we have a lot of toxic buildup in the gut, we get a lot of anxiety in the brain because the two are linked by the gut-brain axis via the vagus nerve. So it really is about reducing toxic load in the gut. We know that one of those is sugar, is reducing carbohydrate. And as soon as we've done that, we'll start to reduce the toxic load in the gut. But there are two other known sort of allergens in the gut. Number one is gluten, and number two is dairy. Now, I tend to just take all my clients off all these, not because they are intolerant, though, just because they're known to be. So why not just take them out for a bit? It's not going to kill you. And you never know, you might feel a lot better. I think the biggest one for most people is dairy, because people do drink milk. We are brought up on bread and we're brought up on milk. And I think when people start taking dairy and milk out of their diet, they suddenly go, oh, where's that? That's a little bit of brain clarity there, and has been clogged up with all that dairy for all those years, and I can suddenly like start to see things more clearly. So yeah, dairy, take that out. So that is cow's milk, cow's yogurts. You can have a bit of cheese, but not too much, preferably unpasteurized if you can, and butter is okay. But then also taking out gluten, which is the hardest. So one of the things that I teach my clients to do is how to make their own bread, which then just becomes fabulous because it's a low carb bread, and it's also got no gluten in it. So it ticks the ketogenic box as well. So those two things will really help with mental health. Just to be aware with ourselves is that serotonin, which is a very important neurotransmitter when it comes to feeling calm and at peace with the world, 90% of it is made in our gut. So if our gut is distressed, we won't be having enough serotonin in our brain, and hence we will have mental upset. So just reducing that toxic load in the gut certainly helps with the mental health. But what I would like to say with regards to overwhelm when it comes to NLP is this. And it's about using this part of the emotional triad, which is our body positioning. And it's about really becoming more mindfully aware of what we're doing. The problem is when we suffer from overwhelm and anxiety, it's normally because we've either got our brain full of stuff that we're worrying about that we've done, or it's full of stuff that we're worrying about that we're going to do. And the brain is just full of worry. And where that sort of fear comes from is a great acronym for fear. Fear for me stands for false experiences appearing real. That's really what fear is. That's what anxiety is. Because anxiety is always in the past and in the future. It's not in the now. It's actually only in the now when we're in a life-threatening situation. So if you're not in a life-threatening situation, you don't need to feel any fear. And the way to stop feeling fear is to be totally in the present, totally in the now. The problem is we spend most of our life, what I call on automatic pilot, where we are just going through the motions of life. So we're driving to work and we're not really noticing anything around us, and we just get to work. And we think, God, did I go around that roundabout? Did I go through those traffic lights? And we're on automatic pilot, aren't we? We might be walking the kids or the grandkids to school, but we're not actually aware of what's actually happening around us because we're just thinking about what we've got to do later on that day. You know, maybe when we're in the gym having a workout, we're thinking about what we got to do later instead of actually the experience of being in the gym. And the thing is, kids are really good at this. That's why I love this diagram, because kids are very good at being mindfully aware. They don't spend their lives worrying about what they've just done or what they're about to do. They just are in the moment, enjoying the moment. So that's where we need to learn from them, is about being more mindfully aware. And we can do that in many ways. But I'll share two of them. One is just to remind yourself on a regular basis to put yourself in the moment. And I like to use these with my clients. I'm going to hold this up. You get little stickers. You can have whatever stickers you like. Some people use smiley faces to remind them to be happy as well. And you just stick those wherever you frequent. So on your phone, on your laptop, on your steering wheel of your car, by your bedside table, bathroom mirror, fridge, sink, wherever it is, stick them all over the house. And whenever you see a star, you have to remember to be mindful. And what I mean by being mindful is be in the moment, which is, how do my feet feel right now? How do my legs feel right now? So let's just do a mindful moment just to finish this up. I want you just to close your eyes and I want you to be totally in the present. So I want you just to think about your feet and how they're resting on the floor and how they feel. How do your toes feel? How do the arches of your feet feel? Notice the temperature or how your socks, the pressure of your socks or your slippers or your shoes around your feet. And then just draw your attention up to your backside where you're resting and sitting on your chair. Just notice how that feels. And then just draw your attention round to your stomach. Just think, all that lovely dinner that you've had all being digested away in there. The body doing this amazing job that it does for you every day. And then just draw your attention up to your back and just relax your shoulders. And then take your attention down to your hands and just relax your hands. Just wiggle your fingers a little bit and see how that feels. And then just draw your attention up to your face and just relax your jaw. Relax any tension in your face. And then you can just open your eyes. So you don't have to do a long process, but don't you find when you do that and you are literally just with yourself, you are just being. You aren't doing, you aren't having, you are just being. You are being who you are. And when you do that, all fear disappears. There is no fear in this present moment. Fear is only generated when you create it. Yeah. So mindful exercises regularly, and a great time to do it is if you go out walking. So whether you walk with a dog or you just walk for exercise, mindful walking. Because again, when we walk, and I'll be on our phone or we're thinking about what we've got to do, look around you, look at the trees, listen, what can you hear? Experience in your body what you can feel from your head down to your feet. Be totally in the present. Good. Okay, I'm not going to go on to weight management, but then I didn't really want to touch on that anyway, because if you do all the other stuff I've talked about, weight loss will be a natural side effect. So you can unmute yourselves, those of you that are muted, and if you've got any questions, please fire away. Ooh.
Andy, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Right. I was thinking that you're talking about when you bring something to your mind and then you put it back into your unconscious mind and then you have to recall it. Say you were the police force and you're having to relay a situation that you were in. So that could well be totally distorted, having been in the unconscious mind for maybe years even.
Of course.
And you can then, you know, people are convicted on people.
I know. Exactly that.
Rather worrying, isn't it?
It is very worrying, but it's the case, isn't it? You know, and that's why these things that are brought to court, if they take years to come to court, how can you get decent witness testimonies? You just can't, can you?
No,
because especially if it's a traumatic event, which it's bound to be if it's gone to court, they'd have relived that event again and again and again. Every time they've relived it, they've changed it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's exactly true. And it's what happens within us as well. So, you know, when we say we have that, you know, that event which has made us think a certain way about ourselves, and then we just keep reminding ourselves of that. So I get clients that come to me who are serial dieters, because they said I was always the chubby kid.
Yeah.
So they just believe that they're the chubby kid, and it's their identity. It's what they believe to be true. So until you change what they believe about themselves, it's really hard to get them to change, you know, to become who they want to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's all to do with that little cycle, you know, of that repetitive memory, a negative language pattern. They say that we have, on average, 55,000 thoughts a day, 50,000 of which we had yesterday. So we just repeat the same stuff to ourselves. We do, don't we?
Mm.
We repeat the same stuff. Now, if we're repeating a load of good stuff to ourselves, hey ho, we're doing all right, aren't we? But if we're not, if we're repeating bad stuff, then that's just what's going to be stored in the unconscious. And the thing is, what happens with the unconscious is we can all behave very nicely and control what's in the unconscious when the sea is calm. But as soon as the sea gets a bit choppy, what actually truly comes out is what's truly stored on the inside. I always see it as like an orange. You know, if I was going to squeeze an orange, apply pressure to it, what would come out would be the juice. And it's the same with us. When we're put under pressure, what comes out is what's in the unconscious. And that is why sometimes we react in situations badly and we think, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have been that person.
Yeah.
But that is truly who we are, because that's what came out. So if we want to change our behavior and change the way that we react in certain situations, we need to change what's on the inside. And to change that, we need to consciously reprogram how we think about ourselves and how we think about the world.
Yeah.
And we can do that through auditory patterns by, you know, I said about sleep dreams, but a good one is affirmations. So, you know, if you have a negative language pattern that you use all the time, you need to repeat a positive one to yourself and repeat it again and again and again and again, as often as you can, 100 times a day, and say it out loud and with conviction and fake it till you make it, basically. The more you practice it, the better you'll get at it. So that's the language pattern, you know, and then it's using the visual memory and manipulating that. And it's very much using our physiology, you know, because when we're feeling all sad and down, then we tend to look all sad and down, don't we? You know, but if we sit up straight, put our chest out, our shoulders back, lift our head up, put a big smile on our face, it's then very hard to feel sad when you're doing that. So, yeah, it's manipulating the V, the A, and the K as much as you can to change what you've stored in the unconscious. Anyone else got any questions? Oh, good. I've answered everything for you. Did you all get it? Was it all self-explanatory?
Yeah.
Good. Well, hopefully there are things there that you can use. Let's do a little summary. So, first thing is to start burning ketones for fuel, which means that you will lose weight, because what makes you put on weight is carbohydrates, because then you'll just be burning glucose. You'll always be producing insulin, which switches off fat burning, and you'll never be burning any fat. If you reduce your carbs, you will start burning carbohydrate. And if you reduce your carbs, you'll start burning ketones, which is a much cleaner source of energy, and it will give you a much more energy and does so many other positive things to the body. So that's the first thing. And also using affirmations and using a sleep dream to help yourself get off to sleep. And when you wake up in the middle of the night, before that negative pattern starts whirring, get the sleep dream in. The more you practice the sleep dream, the better you're going to get at it. Yeah, so practice the sleep dream. The next one was cravings. So again, you know, this is all to do with feeding yourself sugar and the gut-brain axis and communication to the gut-brain via the microbiome. So again, reducing sugar. And then the other thing that we did with NLP was habits, is changing those habits and using the trigger and creating a new behavior. Now, I taught you that little exercise. You can do that with yourself on anything. You know, if there's any habits you want to change, you just need to visualize you with the trigger doing the new behavior and then start practicing it. And the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And then we moved on to the overwhelm, which and the anxiety, which really is this mindfulness and being more mindful and more present in everyday life as much as you can, all the time. We should all try and be mindful all the time. Doesn't mean to say that you don't plan. You still plan for all the good things you want to do. But once you've done the plan, you enjoy the plan. Yeah, you enjoy the moment, you enjoy the journey. Yeah. And it's this whole thing that happiness isn't a destination, it's a journey. Success isn't a destination, it's the journey. You know, enjoy the journey. That's the most important part. Good. Well, thank you very much for coming along. It's been lovely to see you. I will get a recording of this. You're very welcome. And I will email you out. Hopefully, if I can download this now, I will email you all out the recording as well.
Amazing.
Yes,
Thank you.
Okay, guys. Lovely to see you. Take care. Have a good sleep tonight.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
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 Bye.